Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see a few faces here. We had pretty good turnout last week, so I'm glad to see a few more faces. And maybe as we get going, other people will trickle in. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Shelley Johnson-Bennett. I'm the Commissioner of Planning, Parks, and Watershed Affairs for Delaware County. And I specifically work with the town of Sydney through our Town Planning Advisory Service. So I assist their planning board through local reviews, through their planning process, local law updates, things of that nature. So I'm pretty familiar with your community. So when we decided to do the comprehensive plan, we decided we would do this in-house so that our department is actually going to do the work. We've done a survey that most of you, I hope, got. We did receive about 480 responses, which is a very good response rate for the surveys. And we're doing a couple of public visioning meetings. We're going to do a little exercise with you tonight to kind of get some additional opinions and thoughts about your community so that we can build our goals and our objectives and then our longer term strategies from that. So to get us going, what is a comprehensive plan? Well, most simply, it's a blueprint for your community. It's where you're headed for the future. It's an inventory of what you are today. It's an idea of where you want to be. It's basically laying out your future. Plan takes a look at a community as a snapshot in time. So it's really, we're going to have census information, some hard static statistics about today. But we're really going to use that as a launch pad to kind of determine where do we want to go in the future? How do we preserve the community that we have? How do we grow business? How do we keep our youth coming back to the community? What do we provide for the next 20, 25 years? Plan is also a legal foundation for your local laws. Any land use laws in New York State have to be based in a comprehensive or master plan. It's a legal foundation that basically says you've done a community process that says the community supports zoning or it supports, hey, sorry, that's okay. It supports zoning or subdivision regulations or different types of land use policies that help meet those goals and objectives long term. It's obviously a very public process. That's why we did the survey. That's why we're doing these community meetings. The planning board works on this before their regular planning board meetings each month. Those are public meetings. You're encouraged to attend, participate, provide your information and opinions. And the plan is intended to be action driven. We don't want to write a plan that you're going to stick on a shelf and it's going to collect dust and nothing is going to happen with it. We want a plan that has real goals, real objectives, real projects, action items that we can then implement in the community to start meeting what you want to see for your future. Past plans and the public process. So the plan that you currently have on the books was written in 2002. That plan was actually part of a much bigger process. At that time, there was a Vision 21 committee and they were creating this tri-town concept of Bainbridge, Unadilla, and Sydney doing planning together. So each of the towns, as well as the 3 villages, had their own plan done by the same consultant. They're all very similar in their nature. And the idea was to sort of look at regional benefits and how you as a tri-town could bolster and move together. Sydney's always been part of the tri-town. When I started working here 27 years ago, I used to hear from the local planning board, we're the redheaded stepchild of Delaware County. Nobody knows we're over here. And I think Bainbridge and Unadilla had similar sentiment, and we've all kind of always worked together. Sydney being the industrial base of that, residential in Bainbridge and Unadilla, the main streets, that type of thing. So you really started to plan that way in 2002. The plan actually individually looked at each community as well, and so your plan actually is very geared towards Sydney with that regional concept in mind. The 2002 goals and strategies to complete the vision included government services, which are your town highways, it's your town clerk, it's the public safety and dog control, code enforcement. It included educational resources, so that's your school system, it's access to higher education. It's your ability to look at whether or not you have resources for adult education, like at your libraries, BOCES programs. Then you had parks and recreation. So here in the village, obviously, you have Keith Clark Park, but you also have East Sydney Lake. City Center has ball fields, and you have the fields at the old school there. It evaluated housing. It looked at housing stock and housing needs, both concentrating on the village, but also concentrating on your other population centers, which in Sydney is Sydney Center. You have 2 real population centers in your community. It looked at community services and facilities. So that's going to be your fire, your EMS, daycare facilities, hospitals, the ability to deal with elder care. And then I looked at agriculture. You still have a very viable and active agricultural base here in Sydney. And so we looked at How do we build off of that? Economic development. Sydney's the industrial base of Delaware County. Economic development is really important here. It's important to the county, it's important to the community, it's important to the tri-town. It looked at utilities. So that is your cell service, it's your broadband access, it's NYSEG versus REA, the cost of electric. Looked at telecommunication. Again, it's out of your fiber optics, it's your ability to communicate with other areas. One of the challenges we have at the far corners of Delaware County, because we're so large, places like Sydney or Deposit, when you call a 911, sometimes someone from Otsego is closer to you than someone from Delaware County. So those types of telecommunications became very important. Then there's the media. Out of your last plan really grew some of the concepts of how to do social media, things that Paul does, and he's live streaming tonight. That's exciting. It's a new technology that we didn't have in 2002 that you have available to you now. Transportation, so that's your roads, it's your highways, but it's also public transportation, it's taxi service, it's now Uber, which exists in areas. That is the Main Street connection. So we really have two Main Streets. We have the Village Main Street, but we also have Main Street in Sydney Center. So we really have to look at the benefits of the businesses on Main Street in both population centers. And then of course, land use, that's your zoning, your subdivision laws, any development trends or land use projects that you might do in your community. So the 2025 public process. Basically, when we look at all of the pieces that we've learned from the census and we've learned from the survey, we now want to learn from you. And the way we evaluate that is we really want you to think about your community in 4 different ways. One of the first ways is we want you to think about your strengths. People working together in a strong community with a shared goal and a common purpose can make the impossible possible, Tom Vlasic. Basically, what we're saying is that you have internal strengths. You have things that you do very well as a community that support your population, support your government, support each other. We want to know what those are because we want to build on them. We want to be able to grow those. But we also want to talk about weaknesses, also very much an internal thing in many ways. It doesn't matter how strong your opinions are, if you don't use your power for positive change, you are indeed part of the problem, Coretta Scott King. When we look at weaknesses in a community, it can be anything from your threat of flooding because you have limited development outside of floodplains, or it could just be, public opinion of things that go on in your community and how do we change that? How do we change the, it's just Sydney in a small town, we're never gonna grow concept. Those can be weaknesses. So how do we change that? How do we fix that? How do we move that forward? Then you have opportunities. Opportunities are more of an external threat, or an external thing. And these are things that maybe the state can provide, or the federal government can provide, things that you could do regionally, or the county can provide. So engaging the whole community with a common purpose to build an innovative and sustainable enterprise, Miguel Reynolds Brando. And I'm only giving you some ideas because we're gonna do an exercise and I really want you to think about these things from your perspective. And lastly, we have threats. There are no absolute rules of conduct, either in peace or war. Everything depends on circumstance. Leon Trotsky. Threats are external. These are things that maybe you don't have any local control over, but they are things that can seriously impact your community. And how do we protect you from that? How does the community as a whole come together to protect from those threats or to undermine those threats, maybe even turn them into opportunities for your community? So then from all of that, as we gather that information, we develop goals, we develop a vision. We're gonna be looking at what your goals of the community are, and we're gonna develop a long-term vision for your community. But that vision is gonna be broken down into 5-year objectives, 10-year objectives, 20-year objectives. One of the long-term objectives is to review the plan when we run out of time again, so that it's always a living, active document that's rewritten and redone and reevaluated on a regular basis. So there's your very short, brief presentation. Really what we want to do with you tonight is an exercise, and we're going to call it's a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Being a little bit smaller crowd this time than we had last time. Okay, go ahead and handle this out. I think we'll do this all together. Last time we gave everybody time to kind of do the exercise, but I think it might be more beneficial just to do together because there's only a few of us here tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the basic categories that we talked about in your last plan that we need to update. And I want you to really think about those 4 things: the strengths and weaknesses, which are really internal measures, and the opportunities and threats, which are more external measures that are impacting your community. So we'll go through those all together, and Teresa will keep some notes. This is Teresa Ferrigno, by the way. She's a planner in my office. She's been helping me with this project.
Yep.
The same one as last time.
Yes.
All right.
I'll take one, please.
So the first category we really want to think about are government services. Remember, those are your town services, those are your county services in some instances, or even state services. This is how the government serves you in the community. So would anyone like to share any kind of strengths you think?
Strong planning board.
Strong planning board. And if you do want to write things in and not chime in, you can always hand them back in and we'll include them. We don't, you know, some people don't want to shout things out, and that's okay. So you can just write them out and hand in your paper. Any other strengths we should be taking note?
This accessibility, like this office is very accessible.
Accessible government space,
I think we have a great highway department.
very good. Any other strengths before we move on to weaknesses? Oh, weaknesses, things we can work on.
Elder care.
Elder care,
I guess, so I've just recently started coming to these meetings and getting involved, and it's kind of surprised me how little community involvement there is in these meetings. And really how important these meetings are. I don't know if people just don't know about them or know why that is. But, it's such an important opportunity to, you know, bring our, for me, to bring my concerns, interests to, this board. So I'm really surprised how little, involvement, participation there is from the community at large.
really?
I went on both sides of Main Street, all the banks, you know, everywhere I could find, figure out, I could put a poster up for this meeting. You know, dozens of posters up. And, that's what we got.
I guess better use of social media. The town and has a Facebook page, and I looked and looked and looked for an announcement of this, and I just couldn't find it, so I made one with myself. I took a picture of the poster and put it on Good News Around Sydney, but I could not find anything from the town or the planning board or whoever would have been in charge of that.
Go to Sheila.
So, sorry,
So-
The Facebook page,
yeah,
let's talk to Sheila.
So public advertising or
Has
public
no,
outreach
yeah,
is a weakness.
yes,
Yeah,
for
okay.
sure.
That's fair.
Yeah.
What opportunities, remember, these are more external, what opportunities do you think Sydney can have?
And then better use of social media to.
Sure, social media can absolutely be an opportunity.
You know, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this right now. I mean, we're still in the process of making this better and better and better, but anybody in the houses at one point can just jump online and watch the town board meeting. You know, right now, I mean, it's streaming, it's not really streaming, but if you go out there right now and click on the link, you can interact with us. So this is part of the social media platform we're trying to build here. We're also gonna work with, Facebook. You know, we're gonna try to stream everything on Facebook, because there's a lot of people on Facebook. You know, you have News Around Sydney, we can promote it on News Around Sydney, and they can go out to the Facebook page and stream, you can just watch a lot of that. We all work on it. It's kind of new, rural America, but we'll get there. Give it about a year, and I'll have it out there. I mean, I'm gonna be working with the reporter, trying to get it out there. I'm gonna be working with WCDO.
Will it be recorded and available later, or? will it
It's,
stream?
everything is gonna be online. From this day forward, you're gonna have all these recordings. You can play them and watch them before. You.
Is there other opportunities?
What is government services
So government services is basically anything that the town, the county, the state may be providing you. So it's your town board, it's your code enforcement, it's dog control, highway department, all of those things are government services. County EMS, local EMS, the hospital,
The schools.
the school.
I think the schools could probably, I don't know how much control we actually have over how much help they're getting from, externally, but they've been so concentrated that I think the outlying smaller towns are now being left behind. Their kids are being bused to these larger schools, and it's really hurting communities like Masonville or Sydney Center. As far as, I think it really changes the culture in those towns because they don't have that center point anymore.
So
And
that's a threat, really.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Sort of the
I was
regional- that's
thinking it
okay,
was
we can
an
move on to threats,
opportunity
that's
to-
okay.
There's an opportunity, I think, to, work with that,
Sure,
to
absolutely.
repurpose those schools in some way.
Mhm.
And make them, again, the center of the community. And the
Okay.
schools are just sitting there for the most part.
That's really an opportunity, the two grammar schools that were closed. Okay, that's you.
I'm gonna break the rule, put
That's
that down
okay.
for a second, and say, opportunity for better coordination with other local governments. Like you said, the last comprehensive plan was a joint effort.
Sure.
More of that, the way Four Towns Forward is trying to,
Four Towns Forward is absolutely an opportunity to expand things. That's a true opportunity, sure.
Why are we not doing what we did in 2002?
So the 2002 project was actually funded through a regional grant, and they hired Suco. Suco actually did that plan. And they did it as sort of this tri-town vision for the future. It just never really came to fruition as a regional plan. Each individual community ended up with their plan, and a lot of the things just never came about. So because each community has its own plan, and it is the legal foundation of your document, your plan needed to be updated. There really wasn't an opportunity at this time to do more of a regionalized plan. And your focus really is your community, so we're just doing the town of Sydney right now. How about threats?
The environment,
The environment,
yeah, I think, just the weather,
climate
climate change,
change.
we've seen that pretty harshly. And I don't, certainly the planning board is the place to look at the infrastructure to deal with, better water management, all of those things. But I'd say that's a huge threat for this period.
That's fair.
I don't know if this is right to say, but I see a lot of druggy stuff going on. I was walking through the village just 2 weeks ago and I was like, what's going on here? As a matter of fact, I was going down Back River Road and like, which actually challenging me, was just standing in the road. Like, so that's something we need to grasp. Because if that gets out of hand, then
Absolutely, I mean, there's,
The back river,
Back River Road, I was just going down Back River Road and there was a street. I don't even know.
hooligans.
Yeah, you can call them that if you like. I'm trying to just be politically correct, and they just refuse to move. So I just like, I want to play this game, just went around them, but we don't do that. I mean, this is not what
I
this is
think
about.
that's a big problem,
Shelley.
well, it's a big problem
It's a
everywhere.
global problem,
But it's a yes, but for small communities where kids don't see opportunity,
and they fall into it, yeah.
they fall into it.
Those little communities, it comes back partly to that. These kids live out in the middle of nowhere. And
they're disconnected.
they're disconnected, we've got these little places where they used to connect. And they're just not there anymore,
Like schools.
those little elementary schools. I know I kind of come back to that, but those communities, I think, were really changed when that change was made. And it was made, I think for reasons that made sense. But
Loss of that community space has an impact, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, in regards to, the drug situation and all that, I live just outside the, village limit lines. But there are times where, the village police are allowed to go into a certain distance.
Sure.
And then they've got basically end pursuit or, their vigilance in trying to watch what's going on.
Sure.
At which time, there were a few vagrants that were walking up the road by me. And I know the village cops were, keeping an eye on them. up until the village line, they turned around at the golf course and went back. Now,
To the jurisdiction.
They were doing their job. To that point, but beyond that, it's a neighborhood watch, basically.
So better coordination with like
So
state
better
and county
coordinate
police
With
agencies.
sheriff's department, state police, village police, I think would be, a betterment for the community.
Sure.
As a whole.
Absolutely.
That's something good.
It's a threat and an opportunity. It's a
Yeah.
threat that you have these jurisdictional boundaries, but an opportunity to maybe fix those boundaries with better coordination, shared service agreements, whatever it may be.
And that brings us to a threat of the lack of opportunity again for adults. I mean, I don't think anybody plans to be a vagrant, but there are not really very good services here for that either. I mean, I think a lot of people just hope we make them really uncomfortable and they'll leave. You know, you can't hang out in the road, you can't wander down Main Street, but there's no alternative. So I would say that's a threat and an opportunity.
I think it's worth noting that both those locations also have zero pedestrian support. And so maybe it's people just walking down the road, you know?
Well, that's the way, hang on a second, if you're walking down the road, see a car coming,
Yeah,
technically you go to the side of the road and let the car pass. You don't
but that's an
challenge
issue
the
with
car.
like myopathy in America, you
Yeah.
know, and so I think that, but both those places don't have any pedestrian access. And so,
Regardless, if you're walking, if I'm driving down the road and
Separate
you
problem.
see a car coming like a normal person, hey, look, there's a car coming, do I challenge it or I step aside and let the car go by?
Yeah, in that
So
situation,
that's
but
the quality of the person. I mean, the other big thing I have is, and this goes hand in hand. I mean, I have a 1,500-foot frontage in front of my house. And Memorial Day weekend, I'll be pulling out maybe 2 or 3 30-gallon bags of garbage out of the culvert. You know, beer bottles, Big Macs in every lot, you know, that's terrible. You know, how do you control that? You can't. How do you police litter? You know,
That's a tough one. You gotta prove
Yeah.
somebody's littering to find them,
I mean,
so.
a camera can do that.
or you could take the opportunity to develop a more volunteer, like have a cleanup after Memorial Day. Again, that's something that brings people together rather than scolding
It's a
them.
very nice idea.
I think we need
Pride
to,
in community.
yeah,
Yep.
I think we need to refresh the whole, Lady Bird Johnson, you know, America Beautiful, whatever the slogan was, but that was a massive
Yeah.
nationwide drive, and I feel like those of us who are old enough to have grown up during that, that left a real impression, and there hasn't been anything like that since, where, you know, this is just something I've been thinking about, because I live on Covered Bridge Road, and I collect trash on Covered Bridge Road. Somebody drinks a lot of bush beer, I can tell you.
You saw that too, right? There's a lot of bush bottles laying around.
Yeah, but, but anyway, it's like, who's doing this? And I thought, you know, kids today they haven't been through that whole campaign that we all went through.
I mean, it's not even that, it's not just the beer bottles, I mean, I've literally witnessed somebody pull over on, with Sydney, Rosewood Road, and just literally just drop their garbage out of their bed into the culvert and drive off, because they felt the need to pollute or drop it on somebody's property, because they don't wanna have WRE come in and, pick up the garbage.
So
You know?
affordable trash service.
No,
No, I'm very serious.
Or
The
just
level
more
of
people.
poverty here is astonishing. And if people don't have the resources to pay for garbage service, you're gonna find it dumped somewhere.
You know,
Well,
Delaware
that's-
County is about the only county, you can take your garbage over and they don't charge you a cent.
We
But
actually
you
are
have
the
to have
only
time to
county.
take it over.
I know, but
And
you
the
know,
car.
Otsego County, they charge us, Shenango County does too, but Delaware County is the only county I know of where you can take tires or anything over there and they don't charge you anything.
Which is wonderful.
Well, yeah, so
But
that's,
it's
you know,
But
doesn't
if the
mean that there's
limitation
not
is
also an
people
issue.
can't get there,
Yeah.
maybe a government solution is we look at a potential transfer station here in Sydney with the county and the town. I mean, that's something the town could certainly do as a way of providing a more local place for people to drop off their garbage and then transport it to Wilmington.
Yeah, I'd take somebody, because I live in Delaware County, but I don't have time to pack up my stuff and go. And I'm certainly not alone. And anybody who's working at a factory job is gonna come home tired. Those people that work in Amphenol don't look like they're relaxing in that building. So, I mean, these are hardworking people who don't have time or money.
But that's a potential opportunity.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to look at the concept of a transfer station in Sydney or a joint one between Sydney and Masonville, shared service between towns to capture that. So that could lend itself to an opportunity for sure.
Or recycling.
Let's move on to educational resources, and strengths for educational resources in your community.
School library.
The school library,
And the Sydney library. Even if looking is the same.
yeah, libraries are educational
Yes.
formats,
City library is amazing.
It is amazing.
That is a positive.
and they offer computer access to people as well there, don't they?
Yeah, they also have these little community events that the Coleman guys, like they do the beekeeping, which I'm part of this year, teaching kids how to take care of bees. They have
Sure,
the derby going on, so there's a lot of community events that are educational, it's not a lot, but they're out there,
there's opportunity.
yeah.
But weaknesses for education.
Let me add another strength, cooperative extension, is a really great resource. For nonprofit.
I'll give you another strength. I don't generally want to do this, but something I think about here in Sydney as a strength for you that we kind of lack in other places is that you have an interesting proximity to Suco, Hartwick, SUNY Delhi, and Broome Community College, as well as Binghamton University, where it's very commutable from here to several higher education facilities that really don't exist in other parts of the county because of your location with I-88. So I would consider that a strength if I lived here,
That's a
but
good point. The city school systems has really impressed me too. I just followed them on Instagram, but, they're, the agricultural stuff, they do the lunch program where they grow food. And they try different, they have little contests where they try different foods and they rate them. Has really impressed me, although I heard that that comes with some federal funding that of course has been stripped. But anyway, that has really impressed me about the city school, and I think that probably boils down to the leadership there and the teachers. Whoever's doing that program is pretty amazing.
you mentioned the federal funding being lost could be a threat to that
Yes.
educational one.
Yes.
How about weaknesses in your educational system?
It's really focused properly on children, but I think some availability for training for employment is available in the area.
So more adult education availability.
Accessible adult education. And
Any other weaknesses? What about opportunities for education?
Well, when you mentioned, access, I went to the Unitivo, I graduated from Unitivo. And we had a program then, I don't know if they still had it, where some of us got to go to Suco and take classes as part of, on Saturdays, it was some program like that, and that was really great. I don't know if they still do that, but that proximity to higher education is a great place.
I think CBO workforce, if we work in conjunction with the school as far as getting kids that are able to do summer work, instead of sitting on their tablets or whatever, just get out there and actually do some physical work to see what the world is like.
Right.
well, the county does, to be fair.
What's that?
To be fair, they do.
Yeah, I know, they
Yeah.
do, but, I think it could be, in a greater scale than what it currently is, because
You're
there
saying it's
are.
an opportunity in the community, it already exists, but it
Yes,
could
it
be
exists.
expanded or grown.
It could be expanded, I think, because I've talked to some teams, that said they didn't realize that there was such a thing as a work study or an opportunity for employment during the summer, like during the junior or senior year.
Sure.
So
Or even did the towns themselves, they hire them to mow the cemeteries.
Right, village does, they take down, you know, some. It's great, you know. But I think that could be, you know. It's,
That's a great opportunity.
okay.
How about friends?
The problem is you have to try to spark interest in these kids, in these adults, you know? Just a couple of years ago, I lit up the park and made, Eastern Ely completely wireless. I reached out to this entire community trying to find somebody to help me put those access points in, I couldn't get anybody. Same thing with this, you know, this office, we had to get it, I wanted to rewire it, ended up outsourcing it because I couldn't do it myself, and nobody wants to get, but that's technology. They rather sit back on their backs, on the floor, with their legs on their ottoman like this. And that's the problem, that's the problem. And there's no
I
interest.
have a kid for this.
You do?
Serious.
Send them over, for her.
Another educational resource are retirees. For instance, myself, I've come back to this community after 50 years of working elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of people who come back to retire. And that could be a resource for schools, just to get people, you know, they describe to them careers outside of what they may be familiar with, or, you know, skills and talents, that kind of thing. That might be a resource.
Absolutely.
I think the threats is, the big one that you mentioned is closing local schools. And, you know, busing these kids all over Kingdom Come, and that school is always the center of the community. And,
You know, that's interesting though, because it's not just here, it's everywhere.
yeah,
I mean, my grammar school is closed. You know, in Mayapack, my school closed, and I was down in Somers. You know, all these schools are closing, where are these kids getting educated?
45-minute bus ride.
yeah,
They just
You get a
consolidate.
kid up at 6 to get on a bus, that's ridiculous, because they've got a bus coming at 7. So they're at the school at 7:45 or 8 to start class. That's insane. These kids are exhausted and hungry.
It's because of declining enrollment.
I don't think that's an excuse. I think,
And I think
wait,
that's
it's
part of,
not for me to say.
that's part of the threat too, is that the state is pushing regionalization of rural schools because of the state aid programs and things of that nature. So it certainly is a threat. It's funding that we rely on from the state and federal government is forcing regionalization. This came up in Sydney Center as well, is the whole educational format. How about parks and recreation? Strengths of parks and recreation in your community.
You sit it down.
Sydney Dam,
We
absolute
have the
strength.
KOA,
Also a strength.
Sydney has an amazing playground.
At Keith Clark Park.
I don't know what it's called, but on the river. And that's an amazing playground. And walking, running trails through there, although I've heard people say they're afraid to use them because kids using drugs, hanging out along the riverbank, and they're worried about crime. I don't know if it's been any, or if that's just.
So it's a strength and a weakness. It's a strength that it exists, but a weakness that some of the, when it becomes social norms threaten it.
Yeah,
Very popular pools in the different communities.
Yeah.
Summer programs.
Oh, weaknesses for parks and recreation. Safety.
Or at least perceived safety.
yeah.
No real trails in the Pine Hill Forest, which is kind of our only safe forest in the area.
Trails and Pine Hill Forest. Trails.
Trails in general.
Trails,
yeah.
Yeah.
So publicly owned lands, making them accessible.
Yeah, they're gorgeous, but you only see them from the road. It's not the same.
Right. Some opportunities for parks and rec, obviously trail development's an opportunity,
I like that idea, and also bike trails would be amazing.
yeah.
like trails. You mentioned pedestrian access, certainly recreation.
We talked about and fun, like smaller urban places stuff yesterday, so
Yes,
anything at all would be great.
other opportunities for parks and rec?
Whatever winds up happening with the green plan space will be huge. especially by just square footage, it's gonna be the entire town over.
Should build up a snowmobile trails.
Snowmobile trails.
Yeah, I mean, there's one going to Vanderbilt down to Weed Hill, but they don't use it anymore.
You so sporadically actually have a winter where you have enough snow to actually use it.
Well, yeah,
That's true. What is the green space? Is it along the river here, or what are we talking about?
It's the green plain here in the village that where all the houses were that were torn
Yeah.
down.
Okay. That's an opportunity, but I don't know for what. That's a
That's a big
challenge.
conversation.
It's a challenge, because it's broken up. There are still houses there, and then you have random lots that don't have a house.
The village
So-
can't afford to tear down the houses,
Yeah,
and they're not, no one is allowed to build on there because of FEMA.
right.
It is a sticking
And
point.
some people
not
did not
famous.
sell their house because their mortgage was greater than the value they were gonna get for their house. I mean, it's tragic. The whole thing is a tragedy. But I don't know, how you make it an opportunity.
I think there's definitely opportunities that could be had that are gonna be reliant on federal or state funding to make it happen. And community support and input, and that's a bigger project that needs to be done, but I think certainly something that should be identified in the plan is finding appropriate reuse of that area to make it a community space.
Is there an opportunity to trying to pull people that are gonna volunteer to do some of this work? Rather than, I mean, I don't know how insurance or anything else would be affected by this. But since we're a poor community that has a lot of able-bodied people looking for something to do, that might actually be a good community building exercise and also get something done,
So your population and volunteerism is an opportunity, that's absolutely true.
if it can actually be deployed. That's always,
to get people to actually volunteer.
I think you would if they knew where and were actually allowed.
And like kind of the granular nature of the green planning space also allows for like smaller bites to be taken off. You know, do one little pilot project, see how it works out, do something else. And
Build benches one day or something.
yeah, or just like beautify one like little postage stamp part, and it's like between houses and people realize in the neighborhood like, oh, this is what we can actually have on the other side of town as well.
It started my.
So the space is an opportunity, it could also be a threat if we don't do something with it, so I think you can look at it both ways.
If you just have to mow it in perpetuity. for that.
Yes, so that's the thing where you can get people to do it though.
But also, you don't have to do it.
With community gardens, like vegetable gardens, or does everybody already have enough land they don't need it?
So I'm gonna take my planning commissioner's hat off of my hazard mitigation hat on.
Yeah.
That green plain space is sort of a catch-22. Those were houses that were flooded. We tore them down because they weren't salvageable, basically, they were destroyed. Because where they are in the floodplain, to elevate them would have been astronomically costly. And on top of that, it would limit who could live there because you'd have to go so high with some of them. But one of the challenges that we've had with potential reuses for that space is that you really can't grow gardens there for food because there is the Honeywell EPA plume. The soil itself is not contaminated, but the groundwater is. So basically, we would never encourage anyone to grow food in that space. Now, there are other bioparcels in the village that that's not affecting, that's a potential, but there, it's probably not a likelihood. That's just because I worked on that project, but I know that, but
So that's a threat again from the flooding.
it is a threat that if you do have this,
I didn't realize we still had water pollution from that flooding.
it's gonna be there forever. I mean, EPA is never gonna delist it because the plume is continually moving, it's in the water.
But what's it coming from?
It originally, the source has been shut off, but it doesn't dilute, so it's always gonna be there. It came from the Honeywell heating systems at Amphenol on the other side of the track back in the 70s. It's been there a very long time.
We need to plant a lot of sunflowers.
Yes. Sunflowers, we've been talking about prairie grasses as creating pollinator space and butterfly space. And
There are some
Instagram
plants that
magnet.
will pull out the pollution. It's an actual solution.
yeah,
That's why Ukraine's all sunflowers and a lot
Yes.
of places.
Yeah, so seriously, if you handed out bags of sunflower seed, people will probably be happy to go throw them around, and that would actually be a solution.
And the beautiful, I have some.
And it would be beautiful.
And then you also have to torch them. You can't like put it in
Yeah.
the compost, you can't put it back in. It has to be a thing that you
Yeah,
incinerate.
keep the
and,
birds
like,
from not.
No, you just keep those seeds, you start again.
But then you
Well, no,
perpetuate
You
the
gotta get
forever
rid of
chemicals
them.
into the thing.
Well, it's mostly in the plant itself, but still, yeah.
But the green space is a big conversation. It's something that has to, those lots are owned by the county, but we obviously aren't gonna do anything without village or town input, so
Yeah.
that's gonna have to be a bigger joint project between various
Guerrilla
governmental
plants.
agencies.
I think that we'll do the real thing. Let's do it.
What are the timeline? Is that an opportunity to like accelerate the timeline, right? Actually get people involved who want to help out?
By listing it as an opportunity in your comp plan or a goal or objective in your comp plan, certainly identifies it for grant agencies to try and get funding to do some of these projects that we've talked about. So definitely, I think as an opportunity in the plan, it can help us accelerate it by helping us find funding for it. That's definitely a possibility. How about housing? Strengths for housing in your community?
You hear a lot about the finding affordable housing is very difficult for people.
For strength, there are houses. A lot of them need some work, but they're there, some of them at least.
So there's some available stock for somebody that can do the work.
Yeah.
That would take grants with it. If we wanted to take, say, abandoned houses or fixer-uppers and make those livable for people, that would require grant funding.
Funding or a private investor with very deep pockets.
But a lot of those abandoned houses are also not really, they're abandoned physically, but they're still on paper somewhere as someone's like write off or some sort of tax asset. And so it's like you have to find who they are and then like get them involved, and a lot of those people are just checked out and, you know, don't let anything happen to the property because they did it for whatever tax reason.
Opportunities for housing.
Build some.
Yeah, you have space. We could get space and build it. I think when we're talking about here at the village, you have capacity at sewer and water, which isn't necessarily the case around Sydney Center, but it certainly would be around the village. Having public utility makes housing construction more affordable. What about threats to housing?
Well, if we're at capacity, then obviously utilities. Just limited utilities must be a threat. If you wanna build in the village, can you build in the village at this point?
Yeah, you do have capacity in the village. We don't have capacity around city center because they don't have public utility. Like here in the village, you do.
We just removed like 130 houses from those utilities too, so there's probably that much more capacity is out into that.
Well, there's that whole neighborhood that people talk about that has streets but no houses.
Clover Lane, are you talking
I
about?
don't know, it's been mentioned in this.
Yeah, the golf course.
Yeah,
That's Clover Lane. The village is actively trying to find a developer to build housing.
They got it.
They do have a group of developers now, yes. Wasn't sure if the contract had been signed yet.
is that going to be affordable housing?
They're gonna gear it towards workforce affordability, so what that means, I mean, the cost of building new housing is expensive. So it's really gonna depend on your income limit probably, but they're gonna try.
It would be great to have more, compact housing in the center of the village.
I have a great idea.
People,
That horrible shopping plaza that's
yeah,
abandoned.
Yeah.
That would be a great mixed housing, little shops, specialty shops.
Taking up behind McDonald's.
Walkable, right in the middle of town.
I was
That's
just
a great
in Rogers,
space.
Arkansas, and it's pretty amazing. It's a little town and it's like old buildings that they've renovated or are renovating and it's you can tell they really care about their town and are trying to,
It would be such a draw.
That's an opportunity, vacated buildings and properties that could be converted.
Yeah.
Sure. What threats to housing?
Your electric bill.
Electric in New York State can be a threat.
Construction costs,
Construction costs is definitely a
it's gonna
threat.
get worse.
if you can find someone to do the work, so there's actually also, I think, a threat of, good skilled workers.
So a lack of skilled labor.
Yeah, which could be an opportunity for education.
Absolutely. How about community services? That's your fire, your EMS, your hospital.
I'm really concerned about both, fires and, medical. My husband had a heart attack and EMS was there, lickety split, it was amazing and they were so good. But I felt really lucky. I heard so many people express concern here about, being out in the country and if there's a problem with EMS, how long will it take EMS to get there?
My experience has always been really good.
They're pretty
I'm
responsible.
glad,
I think
but that's,
Partly, I think, because so many of them are volunteers, they're very young now. You hear that whistle, grabbing their radios, and it's great.
so I think the threat is if those volunteers decide because it's too complicated. I've heard stories about all of the trainings they have, a volunteer fireman needs to go through before he can become a volunteer fireman. Scares a lot of people away, they're just not interested, it's too much. So. I mean,
So Sydney does have a paid ambulance service and a volunteer fire service. So your strength could be your paid ambulance service as major ETAs. Shorter, I'm assuming, you're saying you're responsive.
it's a big town, maybe if you're in the village, you're the fire department, but if you're not,
Yeah,
and you're a volunteer.
we're getting ours from, not Seawood County.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a city responder, but that's because we're on the other side of the road.
And some of that has to do with the fact that fire district boundaries don't necessarily follow town boundaries or county boundaries. So your fire district could actually be different than the community you live in. Which could be in itself a threat because it's confusing. The population may not understand that their fire protection system. How about opportunities for community services?
Well, I think you mentioned adult education, I guess that's under education resources. So community services, well, libraries, right? Trash pickup.
We have buildings available. Yes, also substance abuse. Or services.
Intervention or
Intervention or.
That is a real
Intervention,
problem, because Delhi is where all that is, right?
Yeah.
And that's an hour away. For
Well,
most
and
of
an
us.
opportunity you have is you do have an active, hospital system here, so it's an emergency room, but maybe there's an opportunity to expand services there with the county to include some of that intervention.
Yeah. There is space in the hospital.
So that's an opportunity.
Yes,
The hospital itself is an opportunity.
yes,
Yeah, it used to be quite a thriving little business.
yes, it was.
It was, I was born in the hospital. It was a real shame that that was shuttered.
Mhm.
How about threat to community services?
Money.
Federal funding,
Money's a threat to everything.
yeah.
How about agriculture? Agriculture is more outside the village, but definitely thriving here.
Well,
I
it's
think
the
it's
town though, not just the village.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I would think the town actually has. I mean, it's not as great as it used to be, but we're here.
I think there's severe threat to small farms. Nationwide, but that is a huge threat, it's gotten worse lately.
What's all those government regulations, like, look, I'll sit on my deck at 5 o'clock in the morning with a latte in my hand, I'll just watch all the milk trucks go by down 357, go down to PA, process it, come back here and sell it $5 a gallon. Why? So how is the farmer gonna survive? What they get, like quarter a gallon?
I will say a strength would be that we do have processors here. We have Gordon's in, Walton.
Yeah.
And we have Chobani, well, Chobani's more Shenango.
We have, so I think there's 5 creamers in the county. You've got Lactalis in Walton, you've got Saputo and Friesland in Fraser, you've got Mountainside Dairy and Roxbury, and we've got Clark, which processes their milk.
And we have really a lot of farmers markets. It seems like every little town has one.
Yeah, they're definitely an asset and a strength for your agricultural community.
Yeah, the farmers struggle to survive. You look at all of all of the farms are moldering and falling into the ground. Farmers cannot afford to run farms the way farms should be run. They just can't afford to do it.
New York State's 3 major crops are hay for dairy, corn for dairy, and dairy. And so we're really heavily dependent on a super subsidized agricultural industry. And so, yeah. So there's not a lot of diversity in these
So
crops.
we need
Your subsidy is
So
diversification.
why would diversify? I mean, I have a farm, you know?
That's important. I think
I'm curious, I heard about the Amish coming, in the last meeting. Do they commercially sell stuff or are they a closed community where they're just doing
They
for
do
themselves?
public sales. Some of them have like raw milk permits through the Department of Health and Ag to allow them to sell raw milk. A lot of
But they're
times
not
they sell.
commercially, selling their milk and stuff like that.
No,
I'm
they
just
don't sell it out
curious.
to the dairies, to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
creameries.
yeah, I
They-
assumed not, but I
I
wasn't
didn't
sure.
know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise from people coming, looking to buy. And kind of to approach. I don't know if you call that an opportunity or threat, or.
Depends on your perspective, it could be both.
The Amish community down in Mason, they'll have, it's like baked goods, they're doing local,
Right, right.
yeah.
So the Amish are a threat was,
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I've heard it,
No,
I've heard both positive.
yeah,
and
I think
negative.
most people think it's
I
a
think
plus,
most-
not
yeah.
positive.
I think the threat isn't to the ag, I think the threat is more people are worried about the safety because of the buggies on the roads and the roads not being really built for shared. That was really more the
And
threat that was
environmental
discussed.
regulations that get passed. I mean, you can get a religious exemption. I don't know if that's true in New York, but certainly in other states that allow them to not worry about septic system, for example.
Well, yeah, all the guys at Masonville all have new outhouses on the outside of the buildings. Like their specific set doesn't do it, like some.
Yes,
some-
but-
like,
Is that hooked up to something that keeps water clean?
Yeah.
Those, yeah. That, I would find that very.
That's a big
problematic.
issue.
I don't know where that belongs
That's a
on
big
here,
issue.
but water, purification septic is a big issue here, isn't it?
City center.
More so in the Delaware River side of things.
Well,
It
if
should
we care about the
It's an issue everywhere.
Susquehanna River, I think it's a big
Susquehanna
issue
goes
here.
right next to us, so I know.
Right?
Yeah.
I know the Delaware gets a lot of attention, but
The Chesapeake Bay does a lot with the Susquehanna to look at those issues. They just don't have the funding that the Delaware side does.
so is that a threat to us or not? The fact that we go up aging septic system.
Aging septic systems can definitely be a threat if you have a lot of failing septics in any one area. It can certainly create a contamination point, it's a non-point source of pollution.
And flooding has problems with that too.
Exactly, and flooding can exacerbate that because it can create an ionized situation with your infiltration situation in your public systems. But I think one of the opportunities we have, at least in New York State, is we have a pretty robust Department of Health that manages that. Delaware County doesn't have our own Department of Health, we have a public health office, so we don't deal with septics at the county level, we deal with it at the state level.
I think we should get back to agriculture because that is a major industry for our town, correct? This
It is.
region. New York, upstate.
Well, agricultural, we could, as a township or county or whatever, create more of a cooperative situation that used to be fairly popular in the eighties before they were regulated out. Small dairies can sell their products if they have a place to sell them to, that will come and get them. But, you know, a large, huge dairy creamery is not going to send trucks out to some of these smaller farms with only 8 cows. So I don't know if that's even remotely reasonable, but even some sort of a system that incentivizes that from some of these creameries would be helpful to some of the smaller farmers, for sure.
Well, if you look at like the most successful dairies in the nation, it's like the Nature's Valley, small organic dairy farmers in the Midwest is like, it's a huge thing. And that was just a bunch of people who wanted to pool their resources and.
We had that here.
better. Yeah.
We had that here, it was very successful, and then it went bankrupt.
But it was because the government saying, get bigger, get out, sort of thing.
Yeah, and the bids for it wasn't great. And. Oh, I lost my-
So we've talked a lot about ag opportunities in Chester. Are there other, strengths or weaknesses you think we should be addressing with agriculture?
Our strength is the beautiful agricultural land that we have. And I think it's something we need to diligently protect through planning so that we don't build, you know, I don't know how to say this nicely, but like big storage units on agricultural land and that kind of thing. We need to really have thoughtful planning and protection of our agricultural land. It is very special here.
You know, the other threat is, and I know I'm gonna get a pitchfork thrown at me. I'm a little worried about these solar farms. Ripping apart these forests, you know, everybody's like, oh, we gotta get green energy, yay! And next thing you know, you're wiping out a forest to put like 10 megawatts of solar, so.
We're
Where's
actually
the,
seeing a
where's
lot
the
of
benefit?
competition on our ag lands with solar. They
Yeah.
don't wanna put the investment into tearing down the forest, so they're actually eating up our most valuable ag lands.
I had interest in 50 acres of paper. Said no.
No, I would never,
It's hard to say no to that
never,
kind of.
ever keep my
nature.
forest the way it is.
The current comprehensive plan really expresses agriculture.
That's
It really does. I mean,
How do we, the question is, how do we get the farmers back?
So the county does have an ag farmland protection plan that's quite robust. And it incorporates all towns. And one of the big things that we have is, we actually have a countywide right to farm law, which not every county has. That really protects landowners from like nuisance lawsuits from that neighbor that moves in and sues you because you're spreading manure and it smells bad. We
You're in
laugh,
farm
but it
country.
happens. It happens, or noise. A lot of local farmers have been sued over the years because they're, you know, cutting hay at 6 o'clock in the morning because that's when they have to do it. And the neighbors get mad because they want to sleep in. So those types of things are protected with our ag farming protection law. But we can do more of that. And I think that some of our communities, to address ag specific in their communities, have done their own ag farmland protection plans with very specific recommendations. They've identified their own unique agricultural soils or agricultural properties to protect hay fields that may not be on prime or unique ag soils by USDA definition, but are absolutely essential to the agricultural operations in their communities. So they start to identify those very protected places and can actually protect them at the local level.
So we do that in Delaware County.
So Delaware County has an overarching ag farmland protection plan, but we have some towns that have done their own. So, you know, an objective you may have to protect agriculture is maybe we look at a Sydney-wide agricultural farmland protection plan that's more specific to your community.
Are there any agricultural land trusts in Delaware County like they have out in Buffalo? There's like huge.
There is probably the biggest in the state, but you don't have access to it here because it's Watershed Ag Council and they only are authorized to acquire lands within the New York City watershed.
So opportunity to create.
It is an opportunity. I can tell you New York State has agricultural land trusts that you can get state ag easements to protect agricultural lands. However, it is very, very difficult because you have to prove that there is a significant threat. And New York State doesn't recognize the same level of threat that we do. So they often say there's no development, there's no threat.
The one that happened in Buffalo was 4 private farmers getting together and pooling over like 20,000 acres, where they're like, we're just gonna keep this under cultivation, and we're just gonna.
Yep.
So,
Any private landowner can work with a land trust or with another open space trust. There's Open Space Institute, there's the Otsego Land Trust, which will come into Delaware, there's Shenango County Land Trust. Those land trusts can certainly acquire development rights to protect lands for a purpose, and that purpose can be agriculture.
and those land trusts don't have to obey county lines.
No.
So they can just
They're private,
have
they're
fully
not
independent
private, not for
land.
profit, so they are not bound
But
by
I
county
guess,
jurisdiction.
are those normally, and I'm making an assumption that I'm asking a question, wealthy people who are able to do that, whereas we're talking about farmers who can barely survive.
I mean, these were just farmers that could barely survive, but they didn't wanna sell their land and have it turn into a subdivision outside of Buffalo, and so they created this land trust. to
Yeah,
make
I
so that they
think a
could
lot of
stay
farmers
agricultural.
here would be happy to sell their land to somebody who's gonna develop it, and they're gonna, because they have no money, they can't survive.
Well, and how a lot of them work, they don't even have to sell their land, they sell their development
Yeah.
rights.
It's like
So
air-
what they do is they eliminate the development rights and they end up with about 50% of the value of their property in their pocket right now, but they still own deed and title. And then they're limited to whatever that easement states they can do on that property. So when, like WAC, when they do them, there's a list of things that a farmer can do within the east areas, and they have what they call ADAs, acceptable development areas, that are left out. And that's where all of their development rights get located, so they can all development in one space, protecting the remaining lands for the agricultural production. So there are more ways to do that for land trust. You can do it through they actually purchase the land and it gets held by a trust, or they can just purchase development rights that then puts restrictions on it through an easement that requires it to be within certain levels of protection.
Well, I think,
So there's definitely opportunities there, and you do have availability of those opportunities with these land trusts that surround the area.
So making that information available to the people who need it would be
Which
an
is
opportunity.
absolutely something that probably lacks. Economic development, strengths or weaknesses for economic development in Sydney.
there's a big opportunity there. That mall beside the train tracks.
Great American Gormans and
That is an opportunity, absolutely.
Airport.
The airport's absolutely a strength.
Not that the airport gets enough credit, it's really a strength.
It absolutely is. Their strengths.
So what is the opportunity there?
Your pilot's license.
Okay.
I
Not only
think
that, but it opens our economics to, I mean, people can come in, to see things, to decide if they want to invest in something, for example.
Mhm.
And it also gives, we have the airport, so we just have the accessibility, we can expand on that.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't see commercial flights ever, but.
not
you can have
commercial, but
small
you do get
ones.
small jet service in there. Once they
Yeah.
put the AWAS in, it allowed for small jet service to come in and the industries use that to bring clients in as well as to, bring in principals from other places. Amphenol has an office in Texas, the principal from Texas can jet right in here. And that's an absolute asset for your industry.
You got your medical transport as well.
That's right, and medical transport in and out of there.
And the next time we have a big flood, that's where supplies come.
That's right, because you can get supply chain through the airport.
I don't know if they can, but they should expand upon it. It's like if I'm flying out to Chicago, I gotta go to Binghamton, take a public jumper to Pennsylvania to go to Chicago. I can only take a public jumper from Sydney.
You
That's
used
never-
to.
You can?
You want it.
You have to pay for it,
Well, yeah, of course.
but yeah,
They used to actually have a service
But it
that
should
did
be
that, it
separate. It
was
should
one of
be-
the, I don't know, it was Delta or one of them, I only know that because my dad worked at Universal, and there were times when he had to go inspect cable shops in other parts of the country, and he would fly out of Sydney out to Wilkes-Barre and then to a bigger flight to somewhere
That would
else.
be enormous.
But I don't think you have a carrier any longer. that does
Put
that.
American Airlines in there, put a little pop job and have them go out somewhere in Pennsylvania, what was it, 20 minutes in the flight to Pennsylvania?
Even
So-
Binghamton's had a hard time keeping a carrier, and it's difficult to keep those large carriers, which I think is a threat, is with all of the consolidation of the various air carrier companies. They're relying on bigger transports, so these small airports become less relevant for that type of commercial flight. So that's certainly a threat, but
Wasn't there also a change with general aviation? It used to be that a pilot could charge for to take somebody to Scranton or wherever, Chicago, and they can't anymore.
they can't unless they have a certain type of license. It goes with their license as to whether they can charter or
Yeah, so it used to be you could get your friend who had a plane could take you. I think now you can still do it, like how pay you gas, but it's,
not. But it actually
Just be
can't be
easier.
it can't be an in-car stores unless you have a certain type of license that allows passenger transport.
Then like in the eighties and nineties in Northern California up through like eastern Washington, there used to be shuttle services that basically would literally fly up and down through all these rural airports nonstop all day. And you would just hop on one and get off 4 hours later and you'd be, 6
Oh,
hours
that's-
north.
wow.
Cause that would be great, I mean, I do a lot of traveling, and then
So
So what
the
we
airport's an
can-
opportunity for something like that, if you could figure out how to do it.
So we need to recruit a pilot that has the right license. It's not something that would be used all the time, but I'd like to have it.
Because I'd like to use the headline, planes, trains, and automobiles. We should talk about the interstate also. I mean, we have an
Absolutely.
interstate access between two medium-sized cities to the I-81 corridor.
It's an absolute strength, yep.
Are you talking train? Are you talking automobiles?
But
The trains
for-
and planes covered.
Yeah, the trains.
But for, commercial, you do have an active rail through Sydney, which
Yes.
is not active in other places.
Why not have a passenger rail on there?
Mm.
Even just for goods, you have an active rail to transport.
Do they ever stop here, or is it just a throughway? Because we don't really, if they don't stop.
I don't know if they stop in Sydney anymore or not. They used to,
I don't
but
think
I
they
don't think
stop
they
here.
do anymore.
So that's.
There's an
Nice.
opportunity though, if you could get them to do an active spur again, say at the industrial park. If they could do an active spur near the industry, then you would actually have product transport available through trains. But the fact that you still have an active rail, it hasn't been ripped up and turned into a trail, you actually have an active rail system.
Is it
It's
a
truly
threat?
is.
I'm always curious, because I hear the trains go by at night, and they're long trains. What is on those trains? Like, I
Good
just
question.
wonder, it goes right through Unadilla and Sydney. Is there a threat there?
There certainly could be, I would
I'm
guess,
just
depending on what they're
curious what-
hauling.
What are
if you cross the crossing gate while it's coming, that's great.
So what are they transporting? Like, what
They're,
are they?
they're transporting, I don't know, it depends, I mean.
It
everything-
depends on whoever's kind of hauling them.
Which direction?
Like a wholesale
Yeah,
down
It's
the-
just all in there.
Yeah.
There should be,
Yeah.
they're supposed to
Yeah.
file with
That's
their
true,
cargo, with the local, so that if there's a wreck, then the emergency services know what's supposed to be there. So they can clean it up. For sure, there's bad stuff, just, there's bad stuff on the roads too, though. You gotta trust the technology, I guess.
Something to worry about, citizen.
But the fact that you have multimodal transport accessible to your community,
Yeah.
I would say is a strength.
Yeah,
It also creates opportunity, so I think that's a very good conversation that you use this
like
multimodal idea.
imagine, in the fall, with all the beautiful color, and we have a train that goes from A to B, I don't know, whatever it is. Say up to, Cooperstown. Expand that, they have, what is it, Milford to Cooperstown?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't they wanna put a train in from Oneonta to Albany at one point?
They, Amtrak had talked about going there, but I don't know whatever happened to
That
them.
would be cool.
Cause this used to be, Canadian Pacific and then Norfolk Southern bought them out. So Norfolk Southern actually runs this track as well as the track that comes out through Hancock.
Because that'd be great, because the closest Trader Joe's here is in Wolf Road,
But it's there.
which they really should put one here.
Yeah.
You like Trader Joe's? You want me to write a letter?
Right over there.
I'll write a letter to Trader Joe's and do a little,
Isn't there supposed to be an Aldi?
it's supposed to be an Aldi Here too, I think it turned into did it turn to Advanced Auto?
I
Where they
have
want to
no
put the
idea, I'm not
Mortgage?
sure where they were gonna put all
O'Reilly.
this.
So that's not a trade, they're an old, we need a Trader Joe.
Number of people with close.
I'll work on that.
We'll put that down as a goal, Trader Joe in Sydney. Anything
Well,
else
it'd be
with
great
economic
because I think it would work, because you have Franklin, Otsego, Bainbridge.
This actually came up in
Afton,
Sydney
it would
Center,
actually be really
Did
good.
not specifically Trader Joe's, but they did talk about the fact that the lack of competition for Price Chopper had really limits your ability to have any control over what Price Chopper makes available to you. So you don't have the same availability at your Price Chopper as say they have in Oneonta or other places,
Trader Joe will fix that.
because there's no competition for them.
Are you an investor?
No,
Just sort of, but no.
I think that's an opportunity, Trader Joe. We'll all go out after the.
We have a super highway, interstate highway coming through, and everything seems to be on the north side of it. There's nothing on the south side of that highway, which, you know, is,
Well, yeah, I think.
I know the state land, you know, we have trail, you know, but the asset of the highway, should we be utilizing that land?
Should we use that
Or
land?
be
Sure.
allow people to utilize it.
So that's a potential opportunity,
Yeah.
especially for a joint project
Exits,
with the
another
state.
exit off the highway on the other side.
We do have a truck stop in town, right? That's off the highway.
Yeah, is that ours?
One of them, isn't one of the,
So
According
off
to
of
last times,
88,
it is,
yes,
yeah.
there, that is in the town of Sydney.
But can we actually do something with that land? Or is
We've
it
looked
owned
at
by
that several
DOT?
times, the planning board actually looked at this years ago, is DOT owns it, I don't know why they own such a large expanse. The only way to access it is actually through that.
I mean, they
actual
should
rest
actually
area.
give us that, because I mean, not that I'm against 88, well, sort of. But 88 destroyed all the main streets, down to 7. You know, so they should give us the truck stops.
It's
Or at least
it's already done,
signage.
88's there, now we have to look on the other side.
is there any way to have it, like, I guess we're on the wrong side. The one that's technically in Sydney is on the wrong side of the road, because it's going out of
Both
town.
sides.
But can the one on Unadilla have a Sydney sign, and then one in Sydney have a Unadilla sign?
Well, we have one in 40.
You
I think
absolutely
44.
could petition DOT to put signage, wayfinding signage to Sydney at various locations. So if it's lacking in one direction or another, that can be an action item in your plan to work with DOT to make Sydney more visible off of the highway.
Okay, but first, we really have to do something about downtown Sydney before we start advertising to have people come visit. Seriously, guys.
Yeah,
Yes.
No, you have a destination before you encourage people.
You know, my dream is, I have a dream,
Don't have them
and you know about this dream.
What is your dream, Paul? Sing.
I'm very passionate about city center. You know, I love city, it's just a little jewel that's being underutilized. And I think it's because of the septic and all that stuff there. But wouldn't city center be a cool main street like New Hope? With all
It's
the
already got a
decent
lot of the
shopping.
ingredients.
I mean, we put this in the zoning laws. If you remember, we created Maywood Center and in hopes of building up Main Street. How do we take that to the next step?
I think a lot of that is finding appropriate funding. We do have to deal with the public utilities to make it affordable. And so
Sure.
septic and water, or one or the other at least,
New Hope,
is
PA.
necessary.
They also had 70 years of artists living there.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have 100 years of artists living in city center.
Yeah, but not the density of
Oh, I get
Nakashima,
that, but-
Esherick, and all those.
Yeah, for that, Franklin is probably
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
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 See, I think of downtown Sydney, the village, I mean, the storefronts, they're empty ones, there's space there. It
That's
just
the
seems-
village.
We're talking
And we're talking about the town.
But
It's all connected.
But
They're connected, but I like city center. I think it's cute.
when they're putting up the new buildings at the World
A
Trade
nice little
Center,
Trader Joe's.
they would have whole floor leases for free to artists if they applied, and basically you get a year to work for free in this place, and that it brought a lot of people to New York because they had the means to actually work there at a scale they could never otherwise work. If you've got a lot of empty spaces in the city that are doing nothing, then why not just be like, why not just bring some artists in from out of town and get it? There's accessible studio space, it's an advertisement, this would become a place for people to come create.
So those empty storefronts are an opportunity.
Or even to, I mean, if you wanna bring some money in,
why not do something like I forget which state out west is Wyoming, I think, says, we'll, give you the first $10,000 if you promise to live here for 3 or 4 years, this is, we'll pay you to move here. Well, I don't know that we wanna go that far, but certainly we could make it easier for people to move here, now that so many people are remote. I mean, I get paid what I would get paid in England to work here. That's money that only comes one way, I'm not sending any of it back. So more people that are remote to bring money, we can just sap it from New York City.
A lot of the ways people do that too is like Kansas gives you up to like 40% back of remodel thing in terms of tax write-offs. So you have, like, there are ways that you put $100,000 into fixing up an old house, so long as it's not gonna be a long-term rental or a short-term rental, then you can redeem that in terms of a certain amount of off your taxes for however long it takes to pay that off. And it's not transferable, but, I mean, is there a way to incentivize the remediation? of
Do we have
spaces?
the money in this town?
Some of these places that aren't collecting taxes on them already.
Yeah.
Like some of these older houses, that would ultimately be, and plus while they're earning that tax break, they're spending money here and bringing their salary. I guess listening to all them, the town could focus on areas or homes or property that have been in tax arrears for a long period of time, and like the longer they haven't paid their property taxes, the higher they are on the list for figuring out what to do, so that they become, not just a sap on our system, but potentially a help or an opportunity, something we can work with. Right? Yeah. Is this being recorded? Like, or is someone taking notes, or how?
Teresa's
I've been
taking
watching
notes
Teresa
as well.
taking notes.
But is it recorded?
Yes.
Yeah, I see it.
How about utilities? Let's go back to utilities, strengths and weaknesses of utilities.
We gotta get a handle on NICEAG. No, I'm serious, we have to get a handle on
It's
NICEAG.
definitely a weakness.
This is an interesting story. This is a real interesting story. I saw the energy rate's gonna go up this year. So in October, I basically cut down about 3/4 of wood to burn throughout the winter. In October, went to go read the meter because it was an estimated month. They had 555,000, which is an error. Basically, the meter is broken. I got the bill, it was 3 and change, like, I can't pay, I'm burning wood. I called them, I told them that the meter's broken, okay? They didn't fix that meter until the end of February. So they estimated my bills from last year. So I have the exact same bills as last year. And then they put the smart meter in that they can't use. So they're still estimating my bills because the only smart meter on 57 is mine. And that works with, was it IoT, Internet of Things? So it has no other meters to bounce off of to go back to central. So I'm still getting estimated bills. So every month, they send me an estimated bill and I send it back with the real meter reading, and my bill is like literally 3/4 more than it's supposed to be. So I'm using this as like evidence. I mean, for the last 3 months, I'm actually setting my meter readings in after they read it, theoretically. I take a picture of the meter after I get the bill and I send it to them, and they're like, oh, what's adjusted? Oh, it's adjusted. But yet, all the way back to October, they say they were able to read the meter with this special key that they have. Needless to say, went to Public Service Commission, and now it's going to investigations, because I spent thousands of dollars for no reason, plus labor cut the wood. We should pay that damage to
It would charge you.
They would charge you, and they would keep.
So with PG&E as a threat and a negative and everything but a strength, is there a way to like partner with the fact that everyone's afraid of someone coming in and doing the wrong thing with solar, and instead just incentivizing people to get together and do the right thing with solar to provide some sort of local community power?
I have solar, I have 10 kilowatts.
But I mean, but is that?
But
it's
you're
not
saying community.
an opportunity, because like,
Yeah.
everyone's complaining, like, there's a fear of solar taking away agricultural land, but it doesn't have to if you lift it up.
That's what we can do with the green space on River Street, right?
Yeah.
We
seriously
can't
put it up on-
restrict that we can't put on there.
I brought this up, Shelley, you remember me talking about this, I think. But we have a hill here that was, pretty much destroyed, Richardson Hill. And, what I'd like to do, is I'll talk to you about this, what I want to do is go up onto the ridge. Obviously, you have to talk to the feds for this, right, because it's federal land now.
Is it
Amphenol
federal?
owns most
I
of
think
it, yeah.
Amphenol still owns the
Amphenol?
majority
I'll
of it.
just run a bunch of windmills up there. Take that power, send it back to NICEAG, get the credits, and send it to the schools, and offset the school taxes. But that would be a great idea, because our school taxes are ridiculous.
There's also micro turbine generation for water, because there's somebody flowing by the water here that you can.
You could do that too, I
There's a lot of-
mean, they had a, what, didn't they have like a hydro-powered thing by, East City Lake, where the dam was up by Franklin?
It was a small generator, but I don't think it operates anymore.
No.
And then they've been looking at hydropower on the Cannonsville Dam. They're working with FERC on that DEP.
But even for pressure at like, for the main lines in the village, when you replace the valves for the step down from mains pressure to, there's a company now that's called InPipe that is basically micro turbines that are relieving that pressure, or they're changing the pressure and generating electricity from the water main. And so when you're using your water, it's actually generating power. It's like that.
There's a lot of ways you can do this, I mean, I'm actually thinking about this, I gotta talk to you. Where'd he go?
He said he had to leave because he's got a
You put a turbine on this chimney. And as it keeps going out, it spins the turbine, and it's like, well,
It seems like just a general big opportunity for us to look at in terms of energy production in our rural setting. You know, all these different ideas, but this would be a good something for some group to work on, to really look for opportunities that could benefit the entire
I
town.
would actually take the lead on this. I've been talking about this since Pickford's been around.
Yep.
But, I'm not, like everything else, I'm not doing this myself.
Yeah,
I need help.
yeah.
I would need help to do this.
I think that's a big opportunity. That could help the whole community. And that would be a draw to bring people here. In addition to improving the way our Main Street looks.
The new green town city.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How about threats to utilities?
They're always going down. I think my power goes out at least 2 times a month. It's annoying,
So continuity.
totally.
You
Is that
said you had
climate
solar.
or-
Yeah, but so is tied to the grid.
Why is
I
that
just assumed you had a
happening? Is that, storms?
I don't know. I mean, I get calls from them all the time. Yeah, power's out. It'll be back at such and such a time, determination unknown. You know, stupid stuff like that. And then suddenly the lights come on.
I mean, wires go through woods.
Well, yeah,
Well,
they're
that's by
going along.
design, because you get paid more longer if you keep having to repair it versus like the entirety of Northern Europe, you can't actually have above ground power lines. It's illegal, and they put them all in underground, and they don't have outages.
Oh, Europe is.
Yeah,
like
Sweden
that.
has had one outage since World War II, and it's because they shut down a plant because jellyfish were getting into it.
I hate that.
But you know, bearing in mind, the United States is a lot different than Argentina. I don't know how to.
We're not bigger, we're much smaller than most of those.
Okay, we can look at that as an opportunity.
Yeah, it's really-
And wind is definitely a threat to our above ground utilities, sure. Wind is one of our biggest threats.
Yes.
Transportation, so this is twofold, it's, not just public transportation, but it's also your highway infrastructure. We talked about the multimodal abilities in the community, that's certainly a transportation strength. Other strengths or weaknesses related to transportation?
If we had flood boat launches.
That's, transportation as well as a parks and recreational opportunity.
We need barges.
Barges,
Goods, yeah.
Highway infrastructure is pretty solid.
highway infrastructure is solid.
It's solid. I think we have access to 88. No,
We're
It's
actually
pretty
in a pretty
strong.
good spot for
For
that.
transportation. Are there any
Well,
particular,
if people don't have cars, how do they get to Binghamton, Delhi, and
A ton of
The
taxes.
bus
before
stop used
taxi.
to be at, right here, over on 8, and that's gone now. That's probably been gone longer than a lot of people have lived here.
Yeah, and Delaware County's never had public transportation, so.
Well, Greyhound used to stop.
Oh, yes, the Greyhound station, yeah.
Yeah, just that one spot, and I went back and forth to Binghamton for a long time with that, but that's gone. That is something that maybe could be brought back with enough persistence.
Oneonta is finally gonna have their little bus depot reopened soon, this year-ish. So,
I mean, the
There's
thing is,
potential opportunity.
when they first had that stop, Greyhound had to go Route 7, so it was not, it wasn't taking them out of their way at all to stop.
Right,
Now they have to get off the exit, and that is probably what they do. I mean, get it back to Bennington.
just put the stop up at the exit, so just go on and keep going.
Better than nothing.
I was just wondering if that inhibits kids graduating from high school. If they wanna go to college, say either in John High School, Binghamton. I don't know if that's a need or not,
for public transportation.
yeah.
I mean, I know that this is not city, but my friend's restaurant in Hamden, the hardest reason they can't find anybody to work because no one can drive. Because everyone who's trying to get these kitchen jobs is getting a job from Delaware Opportunities or out of that, and they all have their licenses revoked and all of the things, and so that's one of the things is everyone's going around, any of these new servers going around and picking up the entire cook staff on their way to the restaurant.
Right,
And
so again, the epidemic of drug use and alcohol
Yeah.
use is a threat to transportation, because people can't transport themselves. Well, land use and zoning, it's our last category. You do have zoning in the town of Sydney, but strengths and weaknesses of your land use rules.
When was the last time the zoning was reviewed?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
It took 5 years. About 5 years, right? It took
You
about
just
5
skip
years.
agricultural on most of it, and
No,
then.
that's not how it works. I mean, we had Gene Pickford back then, and I have to tell you, I miss him. He had this uncanny way of just balancing the communities. You know, he gave the communities what they wanted. I mean, city centers, city center, because that's what they wanted, you know. The countryside is what they wanted, you know. He was good, you know, he was good. And what was it, like 54 pages? Now, I think the zoning laws are 156 pages of 5 years of work. You know. And we took a lot of things into consideration. We took the environment into consideration, we took housing into consideration, you know, locality, you know, terrain.
Worked on Zoom during COVID,
That's the beauty of it. We're doing it during
every
COVID.
Friday. 6 of us got.
We had workshop after workshop. How many workshops did we have with the community? A lot. And they're pretty solid. I like, they look good.
What opportunities and threats for your land use tools?
The land use?
Poverty, always,
Sorry?
poverty.
My biggest threat to land use, and I have to live in the war zone, is the septic issue. So
Septic,
we have to figure out a way to fix this whole septic issue on this area going down to city center, because it's starting to make me nervous.
We could expand the New York City watershed.
Oh, please don't.
There's some land use issues, but everybody's got septic.
We have one tree. I'm sitting there, you know, your three watershed.
Yes,
Do it.
yes, there's about 250 acres of town of Sydney in the New York City watershed that drains to the Delaware Basin versus the
Yeah.
Susquehanna. It's up near like Appaloosa Trail and
Yeah,
Milledgeville, it's that subdivision basically drains.
So any septic there is great, for sure.
They definitely have opportunity for septic programs you don't have over here.
And agricultural.
Right.
so why don't we have that same status for for the Susquehanna, because,
Because the Delaware Basin, at least in Delaware County, is because it's the New York City watershed, so we're protecting New York City's drinking water, which is a surface water unfiltered system, it's the largest in the country.
yeah.
It's a $1 million acre watershed, and we are highly regulated on that side of the county. But the flip side of that is that because the regulations are more restrictive than they are the places in the state, the city pays for a lot of programs for non-point source pollutions, like septic systems. So there's a program through the Casco Watershed Corporation where people can get their septic systems replaced.
Oh,
They
The
put
primary-
upgrades into water treatment plants,
The
so.
Vanguard remediation also.
Yeah. Yeah, that's through the ag programs. We've got the precision feed management program, barnyard remediation, which has strings to it. Those farms that get those benefits also have to have a nutrient management plan. So they're basically guaranteeing that they're only putting certain types of nutrients back on the ground. They're restricted to a specific spreading plan, so. For all those benefits, there's also regulation, which is why I say, please do not move it over here, because it's really has restricted our ability to grow any kind of economy on that side of the county other than tourism, because of the New York City regulations. That you don't have here. But the Chesapeake Bay does have some programs, they have some funding opportunities, there are matching programs, there are definitely some state programs, they're just extremely competitive, so we have to find a way to make you more competitive.
okay, so that's an opportunity.
It's an
Some more
opportunity,
outreach to local agriculturalists.
right?
Because a lot of these things, you find out if you go to like Delhi or Cooperative Extension will have, you know, a little farmer meeting thing, and you'll go there and you'll find something. They'll have brochures, but
Yep.
as far as a central place to get information, maybe FarmNet, I don't know. It would probably be good to have some of this information in one spot so that. people
We've talked about that a lot with succession planning for farms, farm
Yes.
transition, that there isn't really a consolidated place. And some of the services provided through like FarmNet are all volunteer based, so they're limited in how much they can actually offer each individual farming family. So we have to rely on other ways to do those things, but there's structure there for that to be built upon, and something we've been looking at the county level.
Water and clean water is a big thing. I think we should also talk about the kind of pervasive use of herbicides, like really broadly spraying on the side of the roads crazily.
That's huge,
Yeah.
right there, that's huge.
Yes.
They need, how do you stop the Roundup from being sprayed with, you know, it's weird. I was in a Home Depot, and I picked up this Roundup, I will never, trust me, I will never use that, ever. You know what works really well? Vinegar. Vinegar
Yeah.
and a little bit of detergent.
Yeah.
Because I have this patio that the weeds go through,
Yes.
I hit the Memorial Day weekend, that's my job.
Boiling water.
It takes,
Yeah.
it goes away, it kills it.
If you can find something that will kill the invasive honeysuckle, that would be a great.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the bees though.
Serious,
Maybe
that.
we need to put a bounty on it, by weight you get paid in milk.
Believe
You know,
me,
so-
Let's go back to this for a second though, I mean, it says right there on the container, do not use near lakes and streams.
Yeah.
There are lakes and streams all over here, and yet we're still using Roundup.
Everyone wants to
That's
have
a state DOT issue.
Well, that's actually a legal issue. They just shouldn't be doing it.
Could we, like, as a town, stop that? Like, hey, DOT, I don't want this crap here.
You could certainly pass resolutions,
We can do that?
there are places where they've been able to get the state to not use it because they've had a high number of like organic farms where you can't put pesticide. So they'll have like big swaths where they just don't.
My
spray.
farm was organic, so I could, no, I'm serious.
I could make.
I'm, that's, even my chickens are organic, I get organic feed for them. So we could pass a resolution to stop them from spraying Roundup up to
You could
57.
pass a resolution requesting that New York State eliminate the use of pesticides
All
in the
right,
town.
this is something we're talking about.
Doesn't mean they'll comply with it, but
They're gonna
it's on
comply.
the record.
It's not the sort of thing that if you have to, you can sue the state to
Yeah.
stop them from
put
poisoning.
together a class.
Cause it's terrible, this is terrible, I mean, the weeds are just dead. I mean, it's just
Well, the
like.
trees are dead, you have like a
Yeah.
whole section, half of the tree that's just yellow and, yeah, my.
No, I totally agree with that, that's something I wanna talk to you guys about. and we're gonna pass a resolution.
But also I think that just educating the people, because like everyone wants their lawn to look like a golf course, and you see all these homeowners going out spraying the stuff and it's going right into the groundwater the same way.
At the same Home Depot, when only answer, I saw these two individuals wobble out of, Home Depot with this pallet of Roundup. And I had to ask them, I was like, what are you doing? That's how they mow their lawn. They just spray it along their lawn and it kills the lawn for the year. I mean,
You think they're floating around well?
that's sick. It's sick.
Well, they may take care of.
We're gonna,
So also
Shelley.
downhill.
Everyone downstairs.
that's something we really need to talk about. I don't want that Roundup
That
on
you
my
can't
lawn.
necessarily require that the state does it, but the town can certainly send a resolution to the state DOT that is part of your land
This is
management
ag.
practices.
We're in an
and
agricultural area here, we don't want
nature.
that crap here.
Right, that you would like them to eliminate use of pesticides on state roads in the town of Sydney.
Are they doing that just so they don't have to mow?
Well, they're
Is that-
spraying knotweed, even though it's proven to not be effective. Most of it's like to try.
And
and-
the knotweed is right next to the river.
That's where it likes to be.
Yeah. it's-
And that's going into the river.
It reduces mowing. The state's been doing it because they don't have the staff to mow the sides of the road. And they're
That's an
required
opportunity
under,
for the town. The state could pay the town.
they
to
could,
mow.
a shared
But
service.
there are other,
Got no money.
there are other solutions. I mean, we just talked about
Job
this. There are other
creation here.
solutions.
And the town shepherd, just like with goats. on one side.
There's an opportunity for a farm
Yeah.
with goats.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
goats might eat some knotweed.
The state has
They will.
piloted that in some places on like the interchanges where they have big areas, they
Yes,
have to
I've
mow,
read
they
about that.
piloted leasing goats from farmers to put in there. I think they're doing that in Sullivan County for a
I'll give
while.
them to them for free.
Berkeley, Oakland, the hills, they do it for fire prevention, and it was just, yeah, they just have a guy who just walked around with goats for like a year and a half.
I know this is gonna sound silly, but this could be kind of a thing for Sydney
It's not
to
so.
become organic.
That would be our attraction.
A safe
20 years from now,
place.
we'll come see the feral goats of Swindon. Roving the streets.
Okay. I could reduce
You guys have
cancer.
work cut out
You know,
for
what's
you.
cancer?
She can take.
Oh, out in the open.
ponies
A healthy place to live.
I don't disagree.
I have to.
I know it sounds silly, but.
No, it doesn't.
The idea doesn't sound silly, the overall, but we're already
I
a
can see a
sanctuary
TV
city.
show.
Goats.
Yeah, I love the idea of feral goats in Sydney.
It's all about it, or bring back some megafauna.
So-
To make Delaware County.
Out of, you'll see at the bottom of your paper, out of all these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we really want to develop a vision. So, is there anybody that would offer up any ideas of what would be your vision
For a
for
Second
Sydney
Amendment.
for the next 25 years?
Everybody has a right to carry a fire.
Oh, no more use, no more
I think it
use.
has something
Or red
to
flag
do
laws.
with clean air, clean water, and agricultural land. And I think these, you don't realize how rare these resources are gonna become very quickly. And it's something that's very special about this upstate New York. But we have that here. So, and with climate change and everything else that's going on, I think those are incredibly important resources.
There's actually an opportunity there, as horrific as it is, with rising seas, there's gonna be a lot of displaced population. And not even being cynical about it, but there is,
They're already there.
there's already opportunity there for making a more wealthy town to wealthier people who are being washed out of theirs.
So a vision statement could include creating a desirable sense of place.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. That's what I was trying to say.
and this is why you have that job. Yes, you have the good words.
Yeah.
And to make that place, we have this aging population with a lot of empty bedrooms, and there's things like rooms for refugees, where you can bring people in, like, there's all of these different ways you can try and fill this space.
Those are all good points for our vision. So how about goals? Any goals that the town should strive for over the next 5, 10, 20 years? We've already talked about a resolution to DOT, that could be a goal.
That's gonna happen.
Well, I
That'll
don't
become an
know.
action item.
I would love to see Sydney become organic.
Yeah,
And another thing, and I don't know how other people feel about this, but I love when you mentioned refugees. The opportunity to help people resettle here, who bring skills and talents and hard working ethos with them, I think could be a real gain for us.
So goals towards better trained, skilled labor in the region.
Well,
So-
and welcoming,
And
welcoming to refugees, whether they're climate refugees or whatever.
You can encourage immigration.
That's what I'm trying to say.
definitely be a goal.
Rather than chasing them down.
Right.
Welcome them,
We need the workforce.
That's
we
right.
need the workforce. Any other goals we should be considering, thinking about all the various categories we talked about tonight? I know we've got lots of,
I see,
Just resiliency generally,
what's that?
resiliency in
Resiliency is a goal?
economic resiliency, like utilities, everything should be environmentally, make this place feel stable, unless on the precipice.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, just like increased communication. Among everyone. And by using that, like, creating more of a sense of pride in our town, which hopefully could help with things like people throwing their
The garbage.
very clean on the side of their, yeah, with their car window. Yeah.
They're absolutely good goals. Anything else? Anything that you would like to add that we haven't touched on tonight?
I think we need to figure out a way to help people who are struggling economically. So that I feel like there's, people feel very alone and the concept of neighborhood, like I think we used to have that when there were like churchgoers. And that's kind of not a thing so much anymore. but-
Community days.
Yeah, a sense of community and support. So that, there's not, I feel that there's a lot of alienation and aloneness. And
The internet is ruined that, you know,
Yeah.
nobody goes out and socializes anymore, because
so maybe we can figure out ways
On
to change
Facebook.
that.
There's not really a lot of opportunities if you are not part of the organization like the church.
Right.
I mean, I think Sydney Center has the concerts starting up again. It's really, that's one of the few things that I know about.
Need to bring back the barn dances.
That's right.
Yes. I like, my grandpa used to played the fiddle and he played barn dances and
Oh,
he tried Sydney and
Yes.
Masonville.
oh,
He was a fiddler at barn dances. Granted, he'd be like 115 this year, so it was a while ago, but. I just remember playing Turkey on the Straw and he said that was one of his favorites in the barn dances.
Yeah, I think just any sense of place in the community. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I thank all of you for your participation tonight. I think this is very helpful to the planning board, it certainly is to myself, to hear from you and some of your ideas. And we've got a lot of really good thoughts tonight. So, if anybody actually wrote things down you'd like to hand in, we'll take those and we'll make sure that they're incorporated into the record. Otherwise, thanks for coming out tonight.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for doing this.
What's that?